I would imagine that it is the case that there is no parable in all of the Gospels more powerful, maybe more well-known, and certainly, probably no parable more familiar. And for good reason. But I want to ask, before we start thinking about what the parable means in a new way, I want to ask you, why did Jesus tell this parable? Why? This is certainly one of the longest, if not the longest parables, and it's probably a parable that Jesus did not tell often because it's only recorded in one gospel. It's in the Gospel of Luke, where so many of Jesus' sayings and his stories and his actions are told in multiple, if not all four of the Gospels. This one is unique. You only find the parable, we normally call it the parable of the prodigal son. We only find this in the Gospel of Luke. So why did he tell it? It was in the first line of the Gospel. The tax collectors and sinners were drawing close to Jesus to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the religious leaders became angry that Jesus would do such a thing. They were angry that Jesus ate and drank and celebrated and partied with the sinners and the tax collectors. How dare Jesus, who was preaching about the kingdom of God, who consistently worked unbelievable miracles, the religious elites, the religious self-righteous, the people who thought they were the best in their faith, they got angry that Jesus would do such a thing with people like that. And so Jesus tells them this parable. Jesus tells them to confront them, to rebuke them, to challenge them, because he knows why they're upset. He knows that they think that sinners shouldn't associate with the holy. That people who are holy and take their faith seriously, well, they should just keep to themselves. Because, as was the thought and is still the thought amongst many people, the idea is if you're religious, you really shouldn't be with those who are not, because they could corrupt you. They could negatively affect you. So we've got to have these lines in religion between the holy and the sinners. And make sure, way too many people say this today, make sure we have that line neat and clear and nicely defined. Because, well, we can't have those sinners messing up our holiness. And Jesus tells this parable. It's easy to focus on the end of the parable, because that's really where the punchline shows up. But let's start at the beginning. Here's a young man, very close in age, if not a little younger than the students who are here. The young man says that famous line to his father, "Give me the inheritance that will come to me." Let's put it in another phrase. Dad, I wish you were dead, and so I could have half of your money. Give me your money now. I don't care about you. I just want your money. I wish you were dead. Now that's hard to hear for us today, but if you go back 2,000 years, if a son were to say that to his father, that would be the type of thing that a son would be disinherited for, would be disowned, would be cast out, and would probably then be exiled from his entire village because of the level of disrespect. Or at the very least, he would have been beaten very, very severely. So we hear that as insulting today. Back then, it would have been totally unacceptable. But the father agrees. The father, without protest, without anger, without anything that would alienate the son even further, goes sells half of his land, half of his flocks, half of his buildings, everything that he had. He sells half of it to give to his son a purse of money. And upon receiving that money, as if to make the point clear, the son says, not only do I wish you were dead, Dad, I wish the whole family were dead, I'm leaving. And we know what that young man did when he was gone. But do you realize that the entire time that that young man was away, his father stood on the edge of his property, staring down the road, waiting for the day, hoping for the day, praying that the day would come that his son would return. After having given his son half of everything he had ever worked for, knowing that his son was probably going to throw it all away in activities and actions and expenses that wasn't beneficial for him, certainly not for his future, but certainly not good for his spiritual life, the father still waited for the son to return. And then, when the day finally came, probably years later, when the sun was on the distant horizon, maybe a mile or so away, seeing the sun and recognizing him, even though he was skin and bones because he had lost so much weight from hunger, even though he was wearing old rags for clothing, even though he would have looked like a shadow of his former self, his father recognizes him from the greatest distance. And not waiting for his son to come back home, his father, which would have been a very big violation of the manners of the day, an old man lifts up his robe and runs a mile towards the horizon to embrace his son. Could you imagine the servants? The servants who were shocked by the action of their master, now picking up their things and chasing after their master down that long, dusty road. And the son says what he had rehearsed, "Father, I've sinned. I need something to eat. Don't treat me as your son, but let me spend my life simply working and so that I don't die of hunger." The father doesn't even offer a response to such an honest, humble, and reasonable offer. Immediately, the father, who's already given away half of his wealth, says, "Go back and get the best stuff that I have. Get the finest cloak. Get the biggest gold ring. Get my best pair of sandals. And that calf that we've been preparing for the next big party we're going to have, go ahead and kill it. Give my best. I've given him half already. Now, give my best to him. For my son was dead, and he's now alive. He was lost, and he's found." Understandably, the older brother is angry. The older brother, who in many ways is kind of, sort of, I'm sorry to say it, like us. Because here we are. We take our faith seriously. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. We dedicate ourselves to living a life of obedience to God. We struggle to be holy. We struggle to be dependable, reliable. We work towards those things that God has asked us to work for. And then we see God, who has lavished such extreme mercy, kindness, and generosity on others. We might find ourselves like the brother, because the brother was angry. Here the brother knows that his father had been insulted, disrespected, and embarrassed. And the father doesn't care. Here the older brother knows he spent his entire life working hard, trying to be a good son, and it seems as if the father only has generosity for the wayward one. And so we've got to be challenged by this parable. We've got to be challenged to think about God our Father in a new way. Because so often, as this parable points out, so often we miss who God is. realize that here on campus, and I would say in most college campuses, the average idea is so many students are engaged in typical college behavior. I don't need to list them for you. Your imagination suffices. This is what college life is like for so many. But the idea is that the moment you begin to behave like that younger son, people have been told, I hear students telling me this, that as soon as they engage in behaviors like that younger son, oh, I'm no longer wanted at church. If I go to church, someone's going to preach at me about my sins and put me on a guilt trip or shame me or not really want me if they knew what I did the other night. And so, people give up their faith. So frequently, I hear this from students. I had a conversation with someone just a week and a half ago, and this student told me, everyone on my hall, everyone on my floor is Catholic. And all of them engage in the very typical weekend activities of college life. And all of them seem to think they're not wanted because they know we're gathering here to pray. For some reason, they've got the idea in their head that we're going to treat them like the older brother treated his younger brother in this parable. You see, I don't know how, but somehow or other the message got out that God does not really have a lot of patience for sinners. I don't know where this came from, but a lot of people believe it. And here's the challenge to us today. The only people that can change this message is you, particularly the students who are here. The only way people will begin to understand who God is in His extreme love, compassion, and mercy towards anyone who struggles with sin, and how much they truly are wanted, how much they truly are desired, how much we desperately long for them to be with us. The only way that they're going to know this is if you tell them. They won't listen to me. Try. I'm really not that old, but to a college student, I'm an old man. I try to be rather down to earth and understandable, but still, I'm a priest, so I'm some sort of an alien creature. You have to tell them. You have to tell them this story by the way that you live, by the way that you speak, by the challenging conversations that you have with them. You have to let them know that all those stereotypes, all those images, all those burdens of Catholic guilt and shame that you grew up with, that's all wrong. That this parable tells us who God really is. This parable is, for us here, an incredible example of who we strive to be. It doesn't matter what you've done, where you've been, what's happened to you, who you are, what you believe, what you think, what happened Friday night. I don't care. We want you. We, as a community, every time we gather, I don't know if you notice this. Do you ever see me, you ever walk in a Mass? I'm always at the door greeting people with a smile. I will never ask a student, what did you do on Friday night? Never. But what I will ask a student, would you like a hug? Because I'm so glad you're here. The challenge for us today is to let this father in the parable inspire us to get to know how reckless our God is with compassion. How super abundant God is with mercy. The father of this parable has to challenge us to be likewise. And the thing is, in some sense, maybe I get to be like the father standing at the door to the church welcoming people, but you the students here, you get to be like that younger son who goes to the parties where that younger son is partying, who goes to hang out, who goes to classes, who eats lunch with them, who has relationships with them, who knows them, who loves these students who feel as if they're not wanted. You know them. They know you, but they won't know the Father. They won't know our community here unless you tell them. Unless you invite them. And unless you challenge all of those awful stereotypes that weigh them down with a sense of not being wanted. You are the only ones that can invite those people back to campus, back to Mass, back to our community. I can't do it. Our community members can't do it. They're praying for you, I promise. But this parable challenges us, not just inspires us. As we come back from spring break, could you let this be a bit of a mission for the rest of the semester? And I know someone's looking at his watch. I know that I'm going too long this morning. But could you let this be a challenge for you, please? Because I desperately want people to know, our students to know how much they're loved, how much they're wanted, how much we desire them here. I want them to know they will never be put on a guilt trip. They'll never be condescended to, judged, shamed, belittled, or preached at. I want everyone here to know how much they're wanted and loved. And I can't tell them. I will always be at the door with a smile and a hug if they show up. But the only ones that can get them